Welcome.
You laughed yourself out of the microphone.
Yeah, I do that often, just it's
You beat me
a
to
way
it.
of keeping it from having too often, but hey, welcome back, acolytes and apprentices, to the Arcane Archive. Yes, we are back once more with another rousing episode of what are you doing, Sammy?
We're doing another episode of the Cautionary Chronicles.
Yes, the Cautionary Chronicles.
It's been a while since we've done a back to back. I'm quite excited for it. It gets in the groove. I get better at reading the stories, I think, the second time around.
Ah,
You
yes. You get
know,
warmed up, you get nice and fresh and aware.
yeah.
Indeed. We are here again, my friends, to offer you an incredible assortment of tales to astound and to cringe and terrify, especially today. For I do believe, Samuel, that our theme we have are quite a bit of some problematic players, yes.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the I think what we look for normally. Yeah, nothing.
Yes. Dare I
Again,
say, maybe even
a theme.
evil,
Oh, I see what you're going
evil
for.
players. Yes. So, that being the case, we have, as we've said, incredible amount. If you guys enjoy and appreciate the terrifying, horrendous cringe that we love to supply you with for your cravings, your endless cravings, please be sure, as always, to like and comment down below wherever I might be here. Yes, indeed. If you like, also subscribe and share the channel. Any all support that is offered is appreciated. And yet, it should only be understood that you should, because we are here for you and you're here for us. It's a give and take kind of thing, and that we're here to support one another and help each other build up resistances to such unfortunate, terrible situations that occur to people in life. And in order to do that, hey, sometimes you gotta be able to just be the bigger person. But
I don't think I've built any resistance. Does that
well, you
only
haven't
apply to
tried hard
them?
enough then, Samuel. We must continue to do so. Your conditioning continues then. Until finally we will become so utterly immune to cringe that we will become the most powerful forces on the face of the planet. But before that, we will go ahead and just read these stories out, as it is a way for us to increase our resistance and power. Samuel, if you would be so kind as to take it away for us for the first story of the
Oh
day.
yeah, no, I'm very very much happy to do so. I
Begin, my
don't think it's
friend.
going to increase my resistance though.
Then you're not trying hard enough, Sam.
No, I think
We
like
must
that's
achieve our
you know how
perfect
like when we're
form.
born you have like a stat line you start with. I think that's one of my weaknesses.
Well, in the game, they do actually have mechanics that allow you to train your stats and such to increase them on your own time. It just takes a while. It's true. It's very involved, but it is technically a mechanic.
I
And
feel
to do
like
so, you have to describe to your GM what you're doing to increase your specific attribute. And in this case, what we're doing here is slowly but surely exposing ourselves to small micro doses of poisonous, toxic cringe in order for us to
oh
build
see, I
up
was
our
thinking like
immunity.
similar to like the drow being bad in the sun.
Ah.
Yeah, like it's not something you can get rid of. It's just like a racial trait.
Well, they actually got rid of that now. It's no longer an
I thought it was still a
option.
thing.
No, I don't believe it's a specific thing that they are guaranteed to have anymore. It's like an optional thing maybe you can do, but it's not like
Oh,
a permanent debuff any longer.
oh, I'd keep it. But I'll start us off. Uh, a story
Yes, yes,
by
show us what we have.
D20 Jules, which is a great name. And the title of the story is quote serious villain campaign. Yeah, see, there it is.
Yes.
Um, a few years ago during the COVID pandemic and the whole quarantine shebang, I decided to give online playing a spin. Scrolling through LFG subreddits, I stumbled upon a post looking for players for a serious villain campaign using the Fit 5e system.
Excellent.
Thinking to myself, 5e is better than no TTRPGs at all, I thought I might at least check and see what the GM cooked up. The post promised it would be an actual honest to goodness badness story about evil characters without any murder hoboing and the usual horror associated with playing as the bad guys.
Hmm.
Naively
Interesting.
believing this, I applied and was invited to a group Discord call where the GM would answer our questions and vet players. From the get
Indeed.
from the get-go, the guy would mention at every turn how every regular campaign always deals with predestined heroes who would save the world and how overplayed the trope is. What they were looking for was a serious campaign with our characters being henchmen to the BBEG trying to resurrect our Dark Lord and help him in reconquering the world. Again, we were promised it would be more realistic world where murder hoping would just put a target on our backs. After all, the good guys have already won, so we technically were covert operatives, and we'd have to think on our feet.
Enticing, yes.
So I rolled a Kenku monk. So you didn't listen, I guess would be. Got a thumbs up from the GM, and after a few days, me and two other guys who happened to be friends in real life joined the call to actually play our first session. Started out fairly fine, if cliche, with our characters being summoned to the place of our late Dark Lord, when we were told in no uncertain terms that our quest was to venture through the magic barrier the good guys cast around our domain to contain us after the BBEG's defeat, and search for the legendary heroes who had slain him. Apparently they had some info needed to bring him back to life. My partners in this mission involved a rogue grung, that's a great character, and
Mm.
an elven warlock. This sounds like a great party so far.
Most evil indeed. Yes, I can see all manner of shenanigans and chicanery they could get up to.
Yep. Transportation spell was cast on us, and we were immediately dropped someplace by a lonesome dirt road. Lucky for us, a small carriage happened to be passing by. We hail it to stop, and the grung instantly poisons the driver. No
Oh,
attempts to conceal our allegiances or barter for a lift, just a very fine poisonous how do you do.
huh.
DM says nothing to it, so we grand theft carriage our new transport and roll onto a small town.
Well, that certainly escalated quickly, didn't it? Hmm.
Yeah. Before even entering the tavern, our grung asks if there's a bank in the town. On receiving a positive response, our rogue states he wants to rob it. And just like that, in the middle of the day, there's a back entrance, but it's locked. A couple guards inside and a safe within which apparently every single gold coin the townspeople have is stored. So our rogue rolls for the sleight of hand to lockpick the door, a successful action. He then makes a singular stealth roll to bypass every bit of security and get inside the safe. Granted, it's a nat 20, but it somehow it allows him to just waltz into the vault, open the safe, and get a shit ton of money out of it, and then waltz out of the building without anyone noticing a thing. Since the carriage incident, I took a back seat, pun intended, and barely do
I get it.
anything and barely do anything. Luckily for me, the two lads have a great time, so my absence is barely noticeable. We go into the tavern and just ask one of the patrons about the heroes. At this point, neither we nor our characters know a thing about these people, who are hailed as the heroes of the realm, having defeated the world's equivalent of Sauron, essentially. And it's not stuff of legends where some people might have grown up in a place they haven't heard of them. These guys are still kicking, so we casually walk up to some rando and straight up tell me we have no idea who these guys are and ask where to find them. No alarms raised for him. He just launches into a several minute long monologue about how cool they are and what a great deed they had achieved. It was at this point I excused myself, saying I had a family emergency call, and quit the call and server entirely. All in all, it wasn't that bad, at least not the parts I got to witness, but it very much felt like a 14-year-old's first bad guy campaign, and it was advertised as anything but. Now, I have an opinion on this. Obviously, it's why I picked it, because it's not exactly like a horrifying story by any means.
Certainly not the most evil one we've ever read before. No.
Yeah. I think I think the person who wrote the story is the problem here.
Really?
So
Elaborate,
please
Samuel.
tell me you're not doing that voice the whole time.
We shall see. I've taken a
Okay.
particular peculiarity for it, so
An interest, one would say.
yes, one might say I have found it to be rather pleasurable on the tongue. Yes.
Okay. We're starting early, I see. So here's the deal. I've thought of how to do an evil campaign, or what I would play in an evil campaign, and the things I would get up to in an evil campaign. And as far as tomfuckery to get up in an evil campaign, poisoning and Grand Theft Autoing a carriage and carriage driver, and robbing a bank in the first town you go to, not too bad.
Certainly not the worst,
Um,
in all
being
fairness.
completely unawares and kind of super gruff and weird about asking questions of the general public in a small town, also par for the course, I would say. I mean, maybe if you're rogue or you asked it, hopefully your warlock wasn't the one leading these conversations because they're a charisma character. But the reality is, you have three characters who do not work well together at all in terms of a party comp. Um, in my opinion, at like low level, even into mid level. Um, it just kind of sounds like you're a ragtag group of shitheads. And, in the sense of like a BBG getting killed by these heroes and almost sealed away, they probably don't have a lot of resources at their fingertips. And if you guys were the best they could muster, that actually sounds like a really funny
I mean,
evil campaign. Obviously, if they
the,
said, "Oh, it's a serious evil campaign," I mean, that's also up to you. You also have to hold down that serious note because yes, it's the DM, yes, it's the other players, but if you just sit there and say nothing, how can you complain about maybe a more adolescent session? This is also sounds like the first session. So like, I mean, give the guy a fucking chance. When does any plan survive contact with the enemy? It never does. So like,
never.
maybe no, maybe it doesn't turn out to be as serious as the post said, but also like I don't know about you, but that does sound kind of fun. May I, as a player, if a DM let me get away with that bank heist, I might have a talk with them after the game and be like, "Is that how you want to do this?" Like, I don't know what level you guys are. I don't know how big this town was. You emphasize small towns, so like to me, actually, if you're an experienced thief or pickpocket or just underground, like, kind of criminal in general, it probably wouldn't be that hard to rob a small bank in a small town. Now, maybe you wouldn't get a shit ton of money from it, but the reality is it probably wouldn't be that hard if you're good at your job. So, like,
Well,
you
also depending
know,
on how
th
powerful you yourselves are, as you
yeah,
said before.
obviously, but like, if you have a plus like 7 or 8 to sleight of hand, which you can have early in the game. Say you also have that to stealth, which you can have early as a rogue if you're like level
It
2.
also rolled a natural
Yeah,
20,
so that's a
speaking.
27 or 28, depending on what you rolled for your stats. Hey, just want to point out, because natural 20s on skill checks don't mean anything. Um,
Technically,
they
yes.
technically don't, but a 30 is like,
That's literally God level
yeah, like
success.
that's like really good.
That's God level success
And
is
I'd be
how
and
they
I
would
can I be
actually
honest,
rank
I
that.
think I'd be kind of mad as a rogue or a sneaky player
If I
if
had to
I
roll again,
again if I had to roll again.
yeah,
And the
nope.
only reason I say that is because skill checks are 20 minutes. If it's a small bank with one vault, I'm not going through a bunch of drawers and bags and shit. It's just one thing I'm hitting.
Yeah.
Is it really going to take me that long?
It's not as
No.
if they have like magical scrying cameras to keep an
No.
eye on things. And you bring up many, many good points, my friend, my old lovable friend. You see, what I have been able to ascertain from this individual's story is you might in fact be the villain himself. But overall, I don't believe that anybody maybe truly is. Perhaps the most logical and accurate depiction is that no one here are the true bad guys. Yes, this original post was advertised as being a serious villain campaign that was not going to have any kind of, low-grade murder hoboing and annoying stupidity usually associated with, playing crazy bad characters. So I can understand, at least on that particular level, why OP might be a bit more disappointed in what was being done. However, as Samuel pointed out, it was indeed just the first session, and perhaps the GM was planning on providing them with the true, as they say, consequences of their actions at a later date down the road. But I absolutely agree with Samuel's assertion before of that, depending on the level that you are at, if you are relatively high level, this is also speaking from my own personal experience as playing a villain campaign, where when you're powerful enough and you're a villain, there's no reason why you wouldn't just take what you want.
Yeah,
Like,
and like, there's also different kinds of villains.
it's
And
true, 100%. And like, but again, like we were saying before, we do want, I understand OP's position of wanting to avoid falling into that incredibly just stereotypical, unimaginative, uninvolved trope of just being, a psychotic murder hobo killer, you know? It indeed is rather just uninspired and low grade. Like, if you're going to play a villain, have a bit of nuance. Please, for God's sakes, be more than just a simple serial murderer or whatever. Even the Joker, who, yes, loves to just destroy, murder, kill, and cause chaos and run rampant, whatever, he also usually does so with a legitimate point in mind. Even if that point sometimes is to prove that it doesn't matter. There is no point. There shouldn't be a point. There is still a method, ironically, to his madness. That's why we love him so much as a character, especially as a villain. Here, of course, I can absolutely see, like, if the players are just kind of going around doing stupid, dumb shit without thinking about it, like you said before, they just get to rob a bank. This is a small town. Yes, if you are a particularly high level party, yes, just take what you want. There's no reason not to. It's not going to be that particularly risky, as it were. Who's going to check on this small little town on the outskirts? And if they do, how could they possibly really know or offer any understanding of what is pertaining or happening? You could also be the type to leave like false information or evidence to maybe implicate that, oh, maybe this was just a horrible accidental goblin raid or something like that. You can absolutely do these kinds of things and talk to these people and whatnot. Like, it definitely seems OP maybe jumped the gun just a little bit too soon. Maybe saw a couple of red flags here or there and made some presumptions a bit early on and decided to leave. But you know what? That's still perfectly fair. It is your life, your game to play, as it were, or not. And, if you didn't want to give them a bit more benefit of the doubt, that's all right. Because the reality of it is many situations that seem problematic, unfortunately, more often than not, probably will be if they're seeing things here or there. But on the flip side, same thing with what Sam is saying, we can't deny this does seem kind of fun. I mean, that's again one of the fun parts about playing an evil campaign is the exact reason of being able to kind of disregard certain things, right? To skip. Here's the thing: so many spells in the game, right, are specifically, ironically, designed for more nefarious or even selfish purposes, right? Charm person, dominate person, gesh, modify memory, like there are so many ways where you could technically, if you were more evil, you would apply these particular spells and abilities far more often for your personal purposes and convenience. Yes, as a good person, you're less inclined to utilize them unless they are specifically on enemies who are either bad, you don't really care about, or have no empathy for. For there is a pretty constant and consistent underlying nefarious or even defiling element to it. Yes. Again, the whole manipulation of the mind and emotions. There's always just going to be a bit of an underlying kind of like, yeah, maliciousness to it, or not maliciousness, but just a weird, strange reaction. Yes, that's it's just understandable. So people might not be as inclined to use them. But if you're evil, well, you use them as much as you want. You don't care if people like you, for the most part. You get what you want out of them. You
Mhm.
take as you need with your power. That is what it means to be evil. Not necessarily that you have to be a horrible, crazy, insane, murderous, whatever. The true term, at least in terms of the game, in regards to alignment of evil, is you just kind of have to be far more self-serving and self-interested. That's literally the only thing that qualifies you to quote unquote be evil, at least within D&D, the alignment chart. And I know a lot of people have a lot of spicy hot takes about the whole aspect of applying the alignment chart. But for the confines of the game, it actually is nice because, yes, you don't have to be, whatever. You just have to be kind of apathetic, self-serving, maybe a bit narcissistic, just basically to having no real capacity for much empathy overall, unless, of course, it's empathy for yourself in a selfish manner. So, that being the case, that is the fun of it. Yes, to not care as much, to not worry about all the potential ramifications, whether they be social or literal, to your actions. You are powerful enough. You have the strength, the might, the magic to take and do what you please within reason. You shouldn't be a moron. That is where you start falling into the shitty, stupid, annoying, and much more, I think, of what OP was worried about. That particular box and area villain, that's a problem. But if you're smart, intelligent, strategic, and deliberate, that is part of still the fun. The point of being a villain is you get to just take and almost, in a way, supersede a lot of like the red tape and bullshit that you maybe have to put up with. The more like, what do they call it? Diplomacy. Yes. You have to be a bit more diplomatic when you're heroic and good, but far less so if you're evil and, heinous. So, nothing wrong here. It's a bunch of, peasant outskirt people who no one will miss or know about them much at all. Sure, raise their entire village or town to the ground and take what you need from them to expedite your personal objectives and agenda. But it is a thing where you have to kind of want to try that. If you are a person who's a little bit more delicate sensibilities, you have a bit more of a conscience that's going to get in your head about it, perhaps a villainous campaign is simply not for you. And that is all right, because in honesty, the game of Dungeons and Dragons has always been primarily and intentionally supposed to be a epic, heroic fantasy adventure. That is usually the intention. That is what was the intention of its creation and inception, as well as its production. Being villains is just kind of, that's just a thing you obviously absolutely can do, but that was always not necessarily the main intention of it initially. So the game is very much designed to be in a more heroic, so you get plenty of that. But if you want to be a villain, then you have to be able to be a villain and be able to take some of the more less than savory moments here or there. Lighten up, basically, is what me and Sam, I think, are saying. Just lighten up a little bit. Have some fun. Don't feel so, again, attached or so, this is the time to be detached, to have a little bit more selfishness. You don't have to be weird or creepy or nasty. You know what I mean? That's not an approval of that. But it is a time for you to just be like, you know what? I'm just going to think a little bit more about myself now, actually. I'm going to prioritize myself a little bit more deliberately and maybe exaggeratingly. And there's nothing wrong with that. It can be fun. It can be a truly fun and freeing experience, especially to see maybe who you slash your character kind of really becomes when you let yourself go in that manner. But that being the case, is there anything else that you have to say about this story, Samuel?
Nope.
Do you believe that we have said all we need, and take with that what you will, but remember, stay evil. Moving on to the next story of the day. This one is titled Power Rangers Game That Rotted Out From Under Me by Shagohad12. I don't know if that's the way to pronounce that, but that's what it looks like. That's what I'm gonna do. So, you guys, this game's been over for a few months. However, I still feel the need to get some things off my chest. Yeah. Back in 2021, I was so excited to start running the then new Power Rangers TTRPG. To be frank, the system is kind of jank and still feels like a beta test for the other E20 games, so things didn't really start off on the best foot. One of the things that soured the game for me was the revolving door of players. When we started, we had one red, blue, green, black, purple, and orange. Orange dropped out pretty early before his character was even introduced. He sat in and didn't really gel with my GM style, so he dipped. Fair enough. Green left some time later for scheduling reasons, and Black left after I mentioned to him that he didn't seem very interested in the game. Okay, interesting start indeed. After that, Green 2, Black 2, Gold, and White joined. Gold also did not last for very long. They were very flaky, and I was honestly thankful when they finally just dropped out of the game, even if I had to retcon their character from the game to do so. Green 2, however, was great for a while. However, his attendance started to get spotty, and eventually he just vanished entirely for a few months. Eventually, he did get back to me and told me that he was fine with just being completely cut, as he had personal things going on. And then, finally, there was White. It's always the whites, I mean, it's always the whites. White started out fine, as they always do. He butted heads with Gold over who was the group's sixth ranger for some reason, but that was also easily resolved. I introduced his character as a civilian, and he did end up joining the group for some adventures as such before he told me he was getting a little impatient to actually acquiring his Power Rangers suit. I gave it to him a little earlier than I had wanted, but I want my players to be happy. Good for you, OP. Not too long after is when the first big bomb went off. Uh-oh. Now, to lay some groundwork, Purple is an artiste. An artiste. One that I have commissioned myself. I absolutely love his work. And around that time in the campaign, White had also commissioned Purple for some art of his character. This, however, did not go well. Without getting too deep into the details, White was unsatisfied, and despite Purple telling him that there was no refund, he put in a dispute on the servers that they both used anyway. And now this is a far bigger deal than it sounds, as at the time Purple was supporting himself entirely through his commissions. So what was the amount in question that White was so butthurt about? $20. 20 US dollars. And what was White's problem with the art? That it had normal proportions instead of the hyper muscles bara style that he was into. Now, before anyone asks, no, it was not NSFW art. I acted as a mediator myself, and we worked out a deal. White would drop the dispute, and I wouldn't kick him from the game. I kept my end of the bargain, and so he stayed on to the end of the game, even if he ended up becoming an anchor around our necks. The other issue with White was his schedule. Now, to be fair, this is partially my fault, as I didn't tell him the exact time slot for the game, and he had another game that ran about 2 hours into mine. Which, that's fine. Until, of course, he began to complain that he didn't get to greet Green 3. Why am I only mentioning Green 3 now? Well, they didn't last more than 2 sessions, so they're not particularly relevant. Then I started delaying the game back 2 hours for White, half the game time overall, so that he wouldn't complain. I don't exactly remember what was the breaking point. Eventually, though, I told him, I don't know if you still have that other game, but you need to pick one or never complain about missing things in my game ever again. During this, he told me, and I quote, "Just remember, you said you'd never kick me." To which I responded, that was specifically for the dispute. It is not a permanent get out of jail free card for any other problems. He then mentioned, well, that's not how he understood that, but from that week on, he was on time. That seems like an absolutely insane way to think to me. Literally, like you have one deal that you make where you're like, hey, you need to drop this dispute with another player that's threatening their personal income and livelihood, and I won't kick you from this game, to them being like, okay, if I do this one favor for you that's actually has to do with another person's, livelihood and life, you'll never kick me from this game, and I can then do whatever I want, right? It's like, The mental Olympic gymnastics you have to do for that kind of logic is astonishing. Truly, truly
Yeah.
gold medal worthy. Uh, let's continue. Black 2 was his own can of worms. For context, it's always the blacks, Sammy. It's always the blacks. For context, he was on the
Jesus
spectrum,
Christ.
which normally would be fine. However, he was very uninteractive as a role player. I would go around and ask the party like what their character would do during downtime, and the most I would usually get out of him was, "Yeah, I go home and I brush my animal companion." And when I asked, "Is that all?" He'd always say, "Yeah, that's it." Or he'd just give himself scenes, I guess, i.e., like, "I get a call from my dad. Hi, Dad." And during a time skip, he randomly decided his rich, naive character had been in a brief relationship with Purple's character's cousin. Something he proceeded to not actually clear with Purple or me beforehand. He did, however, come to me one day saying he'd like to do a storyline where his character was brainwashed and accidentally married a space princess. Hmm. Now, as a GM, I personally don't like to let my players know what I have planned for their characters. I like to take their backstory and the associated NPCs and craft a storyline for them naturally, myself. I told him, I don't think that really fits the game currently, and I don't normally like players to know what I have in store for their storylines. Which, I feel like there's maybe a bit of a middle ground there, OP. If, like, I think it's good because sometimes, obviously, if you don't really consult or maybe know what the player is looking for or wanting for their character, that has a pretty huge capacity to blow up in your face, exponentially. So it's probably good to kind of communicate, and collaborate together for that kind of thing. Unless, of course, you are just very good at reading what your character or what your players want, and you're absolutely phenomenal at that. In which case, hey, more power to you. I like that a lot. But continuing on, this, however, did not end here, and he got really weird towards the end. Black 2 got really pushy about me giving him a love interest. Now, in game, red and purple, as well as blue and white, had hooked up, and I guess he wanted something similar. What I could not get him to understand was that I wasn't just going to give him, that I wasn't just going to give him one. He had to put in the effort with an NPC and see where it went. And I think that's perfectly fine. He never did. Oh, well, there you go. And I had to tell him to drop it because it was making me uncomfortable. A few sessions from the end, he finally told me the reason he was so insistent was due to him finding his own personal life lackluster. I could only respond that TTRPGs are not open therapy and not to put that on me as a GM. Shortly after, he left the game. There really isn't much to say after that. Purple stepped away for in real life reasons, came back for a short time before stepping away for good. Briefly, Green 2 came back as Orange 2 for a session before vanishing again. And then we had Gold 2 for a few sessions before he too left. I'm still not entirely sure why, and honestly, I never asked. Green 4 came along and he lasted the longest out of all the greens, but quit the second to last session. I still have no idea why for that either. For the final session, Black came back as Orange 3. And I know it's not much of a horror story. It's kind of more a lamenting that the game I was so excited for just kind of became a slog that I was internally begging to end. Thankfully, though, I'm now running a Marvel Multiverse game, which was a little bumpy, which, while a little bumpy, has been fun so far. Thanks for taking the time to read. Hey, thanks for taking the time to type all that out, OP. Appreciate that. Well, right off the top, what do you think about this astounding story, Sammy?
I mean, this is just dysfunction as dysfunction goes. Which is not surprising. But they have a very interesting group of people at this table. Um,
Indeed, indeed. I will say, one of the things I did like about this that I want to touch upon specifically was kind of the whole dynamic of like, of Black 2. Always those blacks. Uh, the whole aspect and concept of like Black 2 wanting the GM to essentially just gift him a love interest or girlfriend because his own life in real life was kind of devoid or lackluster or kind of lacking those elements is, I think that is an aspect that a lot of people, I think, feel much more than they'd like to maybe admit. And I think also has a lot to do with why a lot of people that, when we read stories about people kind of interacting in such, socially inept or toxic ways is for reasons exactly like this. It doesn't sound like Black 2 was necessarily like malicious or deliberately like shitty or whatever or bad per se, but they were clearly like, they're apparently on the spectrum, as quite frankly, as we said before, everybody's, I think, is on the spectrum to some extent here or there, at least at this point, especially, if not always. But, you know, it's like people do want, this is obviously, of course, escapism, right? It is a fantasy. It
Yeah,
is,
I mean
it is,
that's just what it
it is a
is.
means of trying to escape for a little bit from your reality. And that's okay. We've talked about that before. A little bit of escapism is not bad. Just like any kind of tool or gadget or gizmo or whatever, it's about how you use it. It's about how much you use it. And those two things are very important. Like you got to use it for the right reasons and you need to use it in a responsible, healthy fashion, right? A little bit of escapism can be very helpful and good for you. It allows you to decompress, allows for you to maybe get some stress and tension off your shoulders to kind of just like, yeah, too much escapism that, well, you're ironically putting more stress on yourself because you are desperately trying to like escape the reality without actually like utilizing this opportunity to bolster yourself, to handle it better and to sort through it better. OP is absolutely right in that it is nobody like unless a D&D game, and to be fair, I will say like I have often theorized and thought of like ways that D&D could potentially actually be a very healthy or therapeutic way of helping people through, trauma, difficulty, mental illness or issues, right? Utilizing the concept of escapism or imagination to maybe help you overcome certain fears, trauma, scars, and everything, I think could be very effective and helpful, But it does have to be done in the right situation, with the right people, with the right deliberate, conscious intentions. D&D or any tabletop RPG in and of itself it's not just a free invitation to start venting or unloading your shit onto other people who did not ask, request, or consent to it. You know,
Yeah.
that's problematic. And OP is right in that regard, and that it's like he as a GM, like you shouldn't put that on him as a GM to help to fix that or do that for you if that's not something they signed up for or consented to or talk or anything. You know what I mean? That's not their job to do that. This can be something that can be helpful and potentially, transformative and help with breakthroughs and stuff like that, but that has to be done very intentionally and consciously with the right people. You can't just expect people to start trying to like, whatever. And because again, what he's looking for, it's not actually going to fix his problems and issues because, it's like he's just most likely going to further develop unhealthy attachments to, you know, his imaginary characters and love interests. It's good to have love interests in games sometimes. It can help, increase the interest of the story. It gives your character a little bit more, again, attachment or you as a player, a little bit more investment is the word. Investment into the game, your character's story and progression, the
Yeah, that's
world.
great.
It can be very helpful. But yeah, you also have to like, OP was saying, the way to actually develop that too is you got to kind of put some effort in as well, right? It is partly on the GM's, responsibility to present those opportunities and those characters for you to interact with, but it also has to be your character's prerogative and intention to also interact and cultivate that, like any relationship, at least, if you want to do it right. But it's interesting for sure. And in regards to the other aspects, Sammy, what do you think? Like in regards to like, White's whole thing, like all these what do you think was the reason all these people left? Do you think maybe OP maybe was not as awesome or great as a GM as maybe they were initially
Well,
kind of showcasing? Like,
I think that's most likely
mm,
what it is. I mean, the reality is like you start putting ultimatums on your table. especially with like when the guy who was it Green who wasn't or no, who's the guy who wasn't leaving or like who was at the other campaign?
White was the one.
Yeah.
White was the other like
So
biggest problem, it
yeah.
seems.
So I think even if the DM isn't in the wrong in how they feel, most likely the way it was communicated wasn't great. Which if you're another player at that table and you have two people at the table who are like either choose me or choose this other game, and if you're taking an attitude with it, even if you're on the right in terms of how your time is being respected, it could rub people the wrong way very easily, very, very easily.
Mm.
And if you get frustrated as well, you might talk in such a way or act in such a way that turns people off of your game, even without meaning to, even without even really thinking about it. Um, I'm not gonna say the GM is like the problem here, but I don't think they were helping themselves. I mean, at the beginning of the story, being like, "Yeah, I didn't actually give a specific time," or it was like, "What do you mean?" That's like kind of the first step is
Yeah.
is
Seems like
is
they made a couple like
scheduling.
key errors as a
Scheduling is
GM.
the hardest part of playing D&D.
It really
Consistent
is.
scheduling is the hardest thing to do. And so if you fuck that up immediately, odds no, your game's not gonna last. Even if you have a solid core of people who can show up all the time, you're missing one person who just like floats in and out, and it never works.
Yeah, it's definitely exceedingly hard. I mean, hell, just scheduling in general in life seems to be the hardest thing for the vast majority of people. Like, scheduling just
Yes.
seems to be really hard for a ton of fucking people all the time. So I absolutely agree 100%. If you can't at least get that down decently, like that down pretty solid, yeah, not much else is really gonna go well for you either.
I'm not saying it has to be perfect, but you should know what time.
No, but I mean, also to be fair, from what OP has listed out, it definitely seems that white was a particularly special breed
Oh
indeed.
yeah.
It's always the whites, those damn whites.
But
Always the
that kind
whites.
of like interaction also is gonna rub off on the rest of your party, whether you want to or
Oh,
not.
100%. The rest of them are going to feel it, and it's going to have a detrimental effect just in terms of maybe morale. Or
Oh
because I
yeah.
mean, I know I would get annoyed, especially if it's like him being late, if it did affect the game, where it was like, okay, you're consistently late. We have to like wait for you. We're all not getting as much time. Or again, the game's
Yeah.
ending early because of your shit or whatever. Like, and especially
I'd be
again,
like,
this.
is this really the game I want to spend my time on?
Yeah, with this person, and this person being the only one who's kind of fucking it up for the most part. It's like, yo, can we do something about that? Like, everything else seems pretty fine. It's just on this one element that seems problematic. And for some reason, the GM ain't really stepping in as they kind of need to as the mediator and, quote unquote leader of the group in a
It's like, oh,
sense.
cool, he's still here. Every
Yeah.
week I'd just be like, oh, this is
Yeah,
great.
we're waiting for White again, huh? All right, cool. What is this, the fifth week in a row? Okay. Why are we still doing that? Like, just but overall, too, like White, definitely like his whole issue with purple and that whole thing of just like that. I don't know if I want to play with somebody who did some shit like that. Like that's just like, bro, it's $20. The art was actually still pretty decent and great. It just wasn't, I guess, to your specific style. But also the question being too was why would they make it in that style unless you okayed it? Like, did you tell them that you wanted a specific, more muscular, bulky Baja Barasai, whatever the fuck it was? Like, if you didn't, then you get what you get. It's $20, and they're literally Purple is subsisting it's literally their livelihood off of their commissions here, and you're now fucking with that. Like, I believe one of the fucking greats literally said it himself. Fucking Dave Chappelle. Do not fuck with a man's livelihood. Don't do it.
Unless
All
they're a
right.
pedophile, then you can.
Well, I mean, I don't even say. I mean, then you should do plenty of things, but it's like if they're evil and shit. But if they're like if they're just trying to like if they're just trying to make a living doing their thing, yeah, even if there might be like a thief or whatever. If like here's the thing, if you're a thief but you're doing it literally to survive, I can't really be mad at it. Maybe that's a hot take for some people, but it's like that's initially what that is what theft that is how theft was initially created, right?
Yeah, it depends on who you're stealing from, really.
I mean, well, that too, but also just back in the day, the person who first stole something was most likely somebody who had no other option.
Oh yeah.
Like the only way they could get what they needed to survive or for their families to survive was
Well,
to
see,
steal something.
stealing comes out of two things, and it's greed, it's jealousy or desperation.
Yeah, it's greed or desperation. Yes.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's
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 like I
it's
have
a
something that or I want something that they have, or I
yeah.
have nothing and I need it.
Yeah. I have
And
nothing and I need this thing and I cannot get it any other way. And there's a distinct difference, of course. Um but that being the case though, where it's just like, hey, if a person needs to do like, I can't it doesn't necessarily make it quote unquote okay to steal per se, but it also doesn't mean that they're a bad person either because they had to. Like it doesn't it becomes much more of a gray area in my opinion anyway. But that being the case, with White being the way that he was, like just you should have just kicked him immediately. Especially
oh
again
yeah,
with the mental gymnastics of basically being like, oh, so if I drop this dispute, then that means that I am guaranteed. That is literally the thought process of somebody who gets kicked out of games often to try and finagle that kind of shit there. That shows to me he knows exactly the shit that he's doing. He has been reprimanded and he has paid for it before in the past, and he was like, this is my chance. I can get an immunity idol from this. Oh, I can't be voted off the island anymore. A permanent immunity? Oh. And you're like, come on, bro. Like, no, that's not how that works. You know that's not how that works. And you just kind of wanted to try and believe that that's how that works so you can justify your shitty behavior.
yeah.
Wow, dude.
Good
Honestly.
job, great job.
Unfortunate, especially in a Power Rangers game, bro. Wow.
Yeah, way to really just like
What a lame-o, bro. Am I right, dude? Come on now.
hitting
You're
the
acting
bottom of the
like this in a
barrel.
Power Rangers game, bro. Not very cash money heroic of you, is all I'm gonna say. Not very cash money heroic of you, Whitey. Nope. It's always the whites,
Okay,
unless it's the blacks.
there's a lot going on in this conversation.
Oh yeah, we're having a fun time today. Let's move on to the next one, y'all. On that note, Sammy, take it away.
Sure. I have another story by Sue Yurikin. Yurikin? I don't know. I can't spell.
Suyuri-kun.
Yeah.
So it's like Suyuri, but then like kun, like
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
I want a
Suyuri-kun.
I want a colorless, tasteless, odorless poison that kills instantly. Parentheses and turnips.
Hmm.
I
That
went to a pretty
seems a little overpowered, I think. But
yeah,
let's hear him out. You know what? Maybe let's just hear him out real quick first.
you never know. I went to a pretty small high school, and no one but me was really into TTRPGs at the time. I was pretty naive, kind of shy, and my only experience was a game worked out on scraps of paper at a camp I'd been to once. But my all my friends were nerdy, so I figured what could go wrong. I roped a few of them into a game I GM, organized a time for it, and rocked up early, ready to blow their minds. I like the
Ooh,
attitude.
yeah, no, he's in it. He's in it. He's in it to win it.
Yep. Um, I decided on it to run a rules light, very open campaign where they could go on whatever adventure their heart desired. Sure, there was something up with all these guard patrols and even some money to be made on the bounty board outside the tavern, but it was up to them to pick what quest they felt like doing. In hindsight, this was not a good way to encourage disinterested players to invest into a story. But at the time, I was thinking I'd ease them into the whole thing by letting them do whatever they decided was the most exciting of the hooks I gave them. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
How experienced is he? He's in high school right now, right?
So, and
Like
they none of them had played before.
he says he's pretty naive, kind of shy. Yeah, and his only experience was a game worked out on scraps of paper at a camp he'd been to once. So I think we can give him a bit of leeway here. Like for sure, not the best, but you know what? You got to start somewhere and you got to learn. You got nowhere to go but up from here, OP. I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah,
It
yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah.
wasn't a good idea, but I understand the
Yeah,
reasoning
rules
behind it.
light, very open campaign, go on whatever adventure their heart desired. Gee, that's already a rather
Yeah.
tenuous.
Well, you'll love this. Alex, my first player, decided his goal was to become a lich.
Okay.
I told,
Ambitious.
yeah, I told him he would need to find a dark, he'd need to find dark and powerful magic and build his own power so he could one day become strong enough to make a phylactery.
Fair. Okay.
He asked if he could apprentice under an existing lich, like the Sith do.
Ooh,
Maybe, I guess, but you'd have to find one first, likely at the end of a perilous quest with danger and excitement.
I
Alex
like
told
it.
me he was going to walk to wherever was the coldest, and I should let him know when he reaches the lich's hideout. Yeah, see, there you
That's
go.
that's
That
not that's not how that. I mean, ironically, his logic isn't exactly completely unfounded because yeah, it is a common known trope for liches that you know they like the air and environment around them is like absorbed or absolved of all like heat for the most part, but you don't you don't just walk somewhere
yeah,
and
that's just
find a
a
fucking
no, you
lich
don't.
just chilling in some
Hey, what's up?
pun intended, by the way.
Want to
Yeah.
learn how to make a phylactery? I suggested that might take a while. He shrugged and then went inside for food, while his character trudged aimlessly towards the nearest mountain range, doomed to die of exposure.
Like, yeah, what?
Graham, my second player, asked if he could check out the bounty board. Excitedly, I relayed some of the quests I had on offer, and the riches offered to the adventurers who could complete them. He told me he didn't need gold. He actually, right now, found a large hoard of treasure buried just beneath the main thoroughfare of the town. He had, in fact, not.
What? No, what? Not, yeah, what?
Graham asked if the bounty board had any other ways of making money on it. I asked, like what? He said, stock market indexes. I said it's a pretty small town in a near medieval setting. They have a grocer's market, a few shops, and a tavern, so they didn't have a stock market. He asked what he could buy. I said turnips. He spent the rest of his turns asking if the price of turnips had gone up or down. If they went down, he bought. If they went up, he sold. Later, he went inside for food. But Luke was the player I knew would be the most into the game. And he was. Before the session started, he rolled up a rogue with all the classic tropes, Assassin's Creed being his favorite game. Ew, that's bad taste. The
Not the
black
old ones, the newer ones, yeah, but the old ones pretty fucking fire.
your favorite game?
I mean, dude,
Your
the old ones
favorite
were
game?
fucking amazing, dude. I know a lot of people sleep
Your
on Assassin's
fa
Creed 3 was badass as
I loved
hell.
Assassin's Creed 3, but your favorite
It had
game?
a great look before they again after Assassin's Creed 3 they kind of fucked it all up. Like that's where I feel like the real downfall was.
Adam.
But they had a great story. It was super interesting.
I
The
think
whole
we're all in
historical thing.
agreement. It's a great those are good.
It was a great franchise for a long time. It's
But
lost
your
its way.
favorite game?
I mean, one of them. It could be one of his
I don't
favorites.
even think
Like,
they're in the top 20. Okay, the Black Hood, the double daggers, and even more dagger-like shifting eyes of his character were sure to find fortune and opportunity in this world of myth and magic.
I do like
At the
this
start,
OP's like
I
his
knew I
his
love it.
diction and his structure. I'm loving it so much. I'm a fan.
At the start of the game, I knew he would be the most interested in the quests I had on the bounty board, and he sure was. Right after he bought a colorless, tasteless, odorless poison that kills instantly. I told him this was a small town, that sort of thing wasn't going to be available. He insisted on asking the blacksmith.
What blacksmith?
The blacksmith, it turned out, did not sell a colorless, tasteless, odorless poison that kills instantly. He threatened the blacksmith to reveal his secret supply.
What?
The blacksmith, scared for his life, told not Ezio that he really did not have it. Not Ezio threatened harder. Having already lost the rest of the party, and frustrated at the nightmare that this had become, and probably wanting to go inside for food myself, I relented. It turned out the blacksmith did happen to have a colorless, tasteless, odorless poison that kills instantly on them, but it would cost all of Luke's gold. He doesn't hesitate. Greedily scooping up his prize, Luke dipped the ends of his blades with the poison. All right, I thought now maybe we can get somewhere. I stabbed the blacksmith, Luke said. He paused expectantly. What happens? He asks. And that was about where I lost it. I delighted in telling him that the poison, being a poison, had little to no effect when smeared onto and partially into the blacksmith via dagger, and that perhaps he should have asked for the blacksmith's supply of colorless, tasteless, odorless venom instead. I told Luke the blacksmith was a tad unhappy and asked him to roll initiative. He claimed his he exclaimed that he was upset and went inside for food. After that debacle, I went back to being GM for a group of players who were actually willing to engage with the fantasy. My 9-year-old sibling and their friends, who never once asked me about the cost of turnips, whether a lich was like a Sith Lord, or what poisons were available at the local blacksmith. But I did start their campaign aboard a ship, just in case. Now, to me,
Wow.
this is just quintessential high school age D&D, unfortunately. Um, I do love. I,
I'm sorry. I had to cut you off, but I'm just gonna ask, who the fuck joins a D&D session to work the stock market? What are we talking about here? What? Am I on crazy pills? What are we talking about? The turnip stock market? What? Oh my God.
what is this, Animal Crossing?
What are we doing right now, bro? What does this come to? What? I don't even understand the point of oh life. What is life? What? Oh my God. Ah. Yeah. Here's the thing. I could even understand, the whole stupid, stereotypical, edgy, rogue, murder hobo, whatever. You just want to work out your stupid, edgy teenage fantasy of having power because you have no power right now. Fine, whatever. I guess I can even understand the whole aspect of like the first player. He wants to become a lich. He wants to have this crazy, powerful. He's probably played World of Warcraft or something, maybe, and he knows the power of the Lich King and shit. And he wants to do that kind of stuff. Okay, fine, that's cool. The idea is badass and sound, 100%. But to literally just be like, yeah, I just want to do that. I'm just gonna have my character go do that.
Yeah. It's I do
Okay.
love the inclusion of like, oh, sorry, you didn't buy the odorless, tasteless,
No,
colorless
that was a
Venom.
incredible. Again, OP is clear. Like I would absolutely play a game with OP. I would love for OP to run a game because it sounded like he actually did. Ironically, even despite his immense lack of experience and a bit of his naivete and everything, his wisdom, he didn't have a very high wisdom score here. He seemed to still put in exponential amounts of work and was very talented. And the fact that he's clearly a fan of the fantasy genre and had perfect like kind of counters and reasonings and logic to all of this stuff. I
I
would
just
have loved to run a game
I'm
with
really
him.
loving the poison venom thing
It was
because
perfect. It was
poison's
that
poison
was
has
a
to be ingested or
Spider-Man worthy
inhaled.
comeback right
Yeah,
there.
poison has to be ingested or inhaled. Venom has to
Venom
be put
injected or like
injected or
cut or
bit or yeah.
yeah.
And it's funny
Yes.
because like in D&D that's not a thing.
Yeah. Like technically speaking, yeah,
Poison and venom are
poison.
kind of an
They
interchangeable.
are. It's the same thing essentially,
Now,
but
actually that's kind of funny because like I think that would be a fun way to like homebrew it and be like, no, you can't. That's not.
yeah, if you wanted to drink it, yeah, you could do that, but you can't
Yeah.
just coat your weapons in it and be like, "Oh, you have venomous or poisonous toxic weapons now." Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I mean, DM did his best to kind of hold his own. I think for most of that. Um, I
I
would have
mean,
just
he
been
he held
like,
his own quite expertly, I must say. It's
I
just
just would have said
unfortunate.
no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing though. He didn't want to just say no, and he wanted to like, because he wanted to play the game, even though he was getting upset. Because really, at the end, at the very least, it just I don't even know. Maybe throughout all of it, these three players, they just wanted to see what he would allow. They just wanted to see what he would do. They just wanted to see what they could potentially get away with. Because, like I said, I feel like the dude who wanted to do stock market indexes, I cannot believe that that is a serious thing he wanted to do. Like, I can only assume he was just trying to fuck with them at that point. He was just kind of being a shitter for whatever reason. Because that's some of the dumbest, most just mentally challenged shit I've ever heard somebody say that they want to do, like just in a D&D game for no
I don't
reason.
know. It's not. They're
Like,
teenagers, so it's not the worst thing.
I wanna play the stock market. Bitch, the fuck do you mean? What really? in a medieval style fantasy, like even in I like to play more futuristic style fantasy myself. I like a blend of sci-fi and fantasy personally. It's like one of my favorites. Uh, but even then, I'd be like, why would you want to play the stock market unless it had any kind of pertinent thing to do here? Or even the fact that the player literally just tried to he tried to he tried to gaslight the GM into being like, actually, no, I have all the money that I needed because I just found it under this thoroughfare under the town, so I have all this money. You're like, wait, again,
No,
did you
you
think
don't.
that would work? Did you what do you like? It seemed like
It's a
he was just
weird.
fucking. He's
They're
just
like
fucking around.
free forming it to the extreme, and I like as a new GM, that's gotta be like, whoa, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. He like, even hell, even as a veteran GM, that would be an absolute like, whoa, what the F moment. 100%. Like that would just be like, what are you doing? Like that's honestly though, regardless, GM Suyuri-kun, I tip my hat, not a fedora, to you, my man. That was goddamn well done. Like I loved again your structure of your post here. It was lighthearted indeed. The tag perfect. It was funny. It was engaging. It was beguiling, but also stupefying and mind-boggling of all the shit that you went through. But I am legitimately happy and glad and hopeful that you found better, much more interested games and players to really be able because you seem to have something really special here.
It's pretty funny.
Like honestly, like in terms of the game, the world you set up, I would love to play in that. Like if you had any time see this, send a message like, yo, I would be down to play with you sometime, 100%. If this is as good as what you made it sound like, and you put in this much effort, oh, I'm down. You got me hooked, my friend. Anything else you got about this one, buddy?
No, I think that's all.
All right, let's move on to the next one here. This next post is titled I Blew Up on an Adversarial Player. Oh my. By Duoplex 19. So, I've got a player that causes a variety of problems, you see. Too many asides which distract from the focus. Too many inappropriate jokes which no one can even banter off of. Ooh, that's a capital offense if I've ever seen one. Complains about every single ruling, even if it's written as plain as day in the rule book. Doesn't know many of the rules of the game, but operates as if he does. Assumes that if something doesn't work out his way, then I must be targeting him as a person specifically. Adversarial to other players as well, constantly arguing with them about the party's goals, constantly over suspicious of any and every single NPC. No matter how helpful, he fails RPs nearly every single social interaction because he's convinced they're secretly out to get him and have the power to ruin him on the spot if he trusts them. I have also had players like that, and it is definitely a bit frustrating and weird where you're just like, no, he's trustworthy. Like I even had you roll an insight check. You believe him. You rolled high. You believe him. He's helped you. Like, why do you assume he's gonna betray you? Why, like, all right. Constantly encourages other players to act out of their character's personality for, more often than not, no reason at all. Plays a cleric, yet refuses to heal the party almost ever. Not that all clerics have to, of course, mind you, but he agreed when making the character that that was the role he was planning to fill. As such, everyone else make characters without much healing capabilities. He grinds gameplay and roleplay to a near halt nearly every sentence by accusing me of trying to cheat the party. Gets absolutely shit-faced drunk 7 to 10 sessions of the time and is an aggressive drunk at that. And when he does, I have to end the session immediately. We've had about 8 sessions or so which were less than 2 hours due to this issue. Now, if you're wondering how I've tolerated nearly 40 weeks of this nonsense, it's because I have another player who can usually rein him in enough to keep things moving at least a tad bit faster than an agonizing crawl. Unfortunately, the good player was not able to attend the recent session because of some very justifiable reasons, and he
Oh,
even sent me his character sheet for me to play it for him, as well as some detailed instructions on how his character would act in general. So, we ran the session anyways. Yes, I know. The party had rescued some hostages and were trying to interrogate their captors. They managed to get all the information that they needed after much teeth pulling based on the problems described above, then turned their attention to the hostages themselves. I had the rescued hostages be helpful, obviously. When the party was questioning them, I tried my best to give them helpful and honest answers, but had to take short pauses every now and then while I figured out appropriate responses. The problem player deemed that as cagey and began threatening the innocent, defenseless hostages with, "I'm gonna bite his testicles off."
Oh God.
To which I just kind of threw my hands up and said, "You know what? Fuck an insight roll, I guess. You just know definitively that he's hiding something from you. Might as well just kill him now." And it was at that point he knew he had fucked up. Because I then proceeded to go off on this player about how it seems like he grinds the gameplay to a halt nearly every sentence by making everything a goddamn problem. How if it weren't for that, the party would be more than 4 levels higher and nearing the end of the campaign by now. How I had a full dungeon planned for that session, yet we were stuck on this stupid interrogation for over a goddamn hour. This, of course, ended the session immediately. I should not have blown up the way I did, but I was at the end of my fuse, and it's not like I hadn't tried communication prior either. Nearly every single session, me and the good player I mentioned before would take time at the end of the session to try and patiently, mind you, explain that the game does not function well with that kind of behavior, and that people could have tons more fun if we just focused in a little bit more, just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. We even asked kindly multiple times for him to tone it back and not be so suspicious or confrontational. I am all for a good time. Many tables I've played at would consider me even to be the jokester or goofball of the party, but never have I made it such an issue as to ruin the experience for others. I know the line. This guy does not. I am now taking a break from DMing that campaign while I look for this guy's replacement. I had hit sunk cost fallacy with him about 10 sessions ago, but I'm over that now. TLDR, I went off on a player who causes a bunch of problems and hasn't compromised even when cordially and respectfully communicated with. Thank you all for reading. End post.
That's awesome.
Yeah, what do you think of this one, buddy?
Um, I mean, it's a good one. It's another example of just I don't know how certain players kind of make it past the provisional stage.
Mm-hmm.
And like I do understand. I know for some people, they don't do like a session zero. They don't really check if people are a good fit for their table. But like it's it's the reason why my my table at least like really heavily relies on a session zero. And we play with the same people. So that's even more telling is the fact that even then we're like, well, we know each other, but we're still gonna double check just to make sure that everyone's on the same page here.
I mean, that's just good communication in general. Even if you've lived with somebody, hell, we were just talking about in real life in terms of relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, friendship, whatever, you still need to almost always consistently communicate. And even it's also a wonderful, beautiful, brilliant idea to do check-ins every now and then, you know? To be like, hey, yeah, are we still okay? Is everything okay? Are we on the same page? Do we understand? Because again, even with people you've been with for years, sometimes certain things can maybe get lost in translation or maybe sometimes kind of missed, or certain things can maybe be received differently or misinterpreted. It's just kind of unfortunately the nature of humans, where our perception is just inherently flawed, and depending on our mental state, our physical state, whatever, we can't really see everything all the time clearly or accurately.
No.
So communicate, check in, be clear on what's happening. Now, one thing that I liked about this, particularly that I wanted to touch upon and talk about, was the idea and concept of like, even after everything that happened, the OP was still feeling like bad for blowing up at that player.
Which is, I think, a very valuable,
No, I agree on it because even sometimes, one commenter, the top commenter actually says something really nice. It's like it's never a great feeling to have chewed someone's head off, even when it's earned. So I am sympathetic on that front. Sounds like you could have cut your loss on this guy a while back, but better now than often than never. The other comment says losing your rag often feels bad all around, but honestly, there are times that it's the only. I think I may have to say rage. I don't know if this person's first language is English, but there are a lot of typos. But there are times that it's the only way to get through to people that you've had enough. You didn't cause the problem, he did, and you tried being civilized about it to no avail. You did everything right, and he refused to change. As a community, many of us struggle for various reasons with calling people out on their BS. It's hard to do, but sometimes you have to call a douchebag before showing them the door for their good as well as yours. And I thought that was beautifully put. And I know that that is indeed, I think, what causes a lot of these horror stories, right? Is they feel too bad or they feel too like, hell, even in real life, where it's like sometimes you gotta pull that, and here's I don't even think it's applicable. Sometimes you gotta pull that Karen out of you, right? Sometimes you gotta pull that part of yourself out of you where like, yeah, some people are just not gonna fucking get the hint. They're not gonna, in fact, they will do the opposite. They will, in fact, take advantage of the fact that certain people are just too, like, nice or timid or reserved or considerate to just let them have it and to be honest, open, and just, and again, you don't have to be an asshole about it, of course. You don't have to be whatever. And yeah, you shouldn't necessarily allow it to get to the point where you have to blow up. But sometimes, if you've done literally, like you said, you did everything else, OP. Everybody else seems to agree. You did a lot. You did everything you kind of could within reason. And if he's still not getting the memo, you're kind of left with no other option to be like, okay, you know what? Boom! Go off at that point because he has shown he does not care about you. He is not reciprocating the consideration, the respect, and appreciation.
No.
So at that point, all bets are off. Treat people how you want to be treated, right? And if they're not treating you the way that you want to be treated, then if you can't beat them, join them, I guess, becomes a thing. Now, that's not to say that two wrongs make a right, because I don't believe that, right? There is still a limit where
No.
you need to be able to keep your personal sense of honor, right? And decency and respect. But that doesn't mean that you have to just let someone walk all over you and spit on that shit, right? You got to be able to handle yourself to a certain extent. Don't sink down to their level. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You know what I mean? It's an older saying. I hope people, again, get what I'm saying by that. You can handle that situation. You can't always handle everything perfectly, like civilized and, considerate. Because if people aren't going to do that, they're not going to hear that. Then sometimes you got to be like, all right, you know what? Screw it then. Let's go. We're going to do this thing. You're done. It's over. This is the issue. This is the problem. Get the fuck out. Sometimes you just gotta
Yeah.
fucking handle shit. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And that's, I think, what a lot of people, like I said, again, these people are saying too that they sympathize. It's like, yeah, it does not often feel good to have to go off on somebody like that because he would have much rather been able to handle it in a much simpler, civilized, chill, calm manner, right? That was amicable, it was perfectly considerate and respectful. You'd much rather do it that way. Anybody who does get off on that, there's kind of something wrong with them mentally, most likely. Most people are not going to have fun going off on somebody.
No.
But sometimes you kind of have to if they're not going to receive anything any other way. Again, you said you don't have to be, you know, an asshole about it because there's a fine line. Like you can go off if you're honest, if you're just direct, you're honest, you keep to the facts of what's happened, what's going on. In my opinion, you're not the asshole.
No.
You
It's
just
all about being reasonable.
Yeah, just being factual, logical, and reasonable.
If only more people were.
Yeah, well, then you wouldn't probably have to go off on them, right? If they could just receive things. But people are too inclined to kind of just take advantage however they can, unfortunately. Um, but yeah. Anything else you got on this one, buddy?
No, I like kind of why you brought that one up, and
I think
I
just more people, yeah, should be. You need to get a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more willing to kind of let that shit out more, you know? Sometimes people just sometimes that's what people need. Both you and the person in question that you're unloading on. Don't do that, in a toxic manner, because again, people do that too, right? Because that's the person that you don't want to be, right? And that's why I love and appreciate OP and these commenters saying, being like, I shouldn't have blown up, I shouldn't have done that. And again, that's not true, but I understand where that comes from. Because yes, you absolutely should never be the type of person who just unloads on somebody for nothing, right? Where they didn't actually do anything wrong. Or maybe what they did was like, it was a slight offense. They didn't even mean anything by it. It wasn't malicious, but you flip out at that. You're just like, how fucking dare you? Like, absolutely not. You don't want to be that person. But as always, this is what we always try to do here at the Arcane Archive. There is a middle ground to meet, right? There's that balance that needs to be found and met where you got to be able to bring that out when you need to and keep it under control when you need to, right?
yeah,
It is like everything else, it's a tool that you can use and you need to use. But you gotta be able to recognize when you need to use it and not be afraid to use it when you do. But also to keep it under control and wraps when you don't need to be fucking letting that shit out. Like, and it's hard. It's not an easy process. It's a very it takes, as with anything, practice and dedication and consciousness, awareness. But that's what we try to help cultivate here, right? Is awareness and consciousness so that people can start to actively practice these things that help you with your games, but also maybe translate a bit to in real life too, IRL. Just some tools and some ideas here or there. But yeah, I think with that being the case, what are you doing? Weirdo. But I think with that being the case, I think that's all that we have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you stuck with us this long, we really love and appreciate that. All the support that you guys can offer. I mean, we've been getting a couple of comments here or there. I've loved to see it. We've it's been really helping boosting morale, especially again with certain things that happened recently. It's been a little bit of a rough last couple of weeks. Um, but we're hanging in there, we're doing our best. And so honestly, just all of that shown was really helpful. So thank you guys so much. Be sure to like and comment, subscribe and share the channel, hit that notification bell. And as always, we will be sure to catch y'all next time when we dive back down into the archive. Take care,
have a good
y'all.
night, y'all.
We'll see you. God, it's always the whites and the blacks.
Jesus Christ, Adam.